Ice water burst across Amara Cole's face, catching the chandelier's light as it rained down her dress and onto the marble floor. For a heartbeat, the whole dining room at the Laurel, flagship restaurant of the Arbor Grand Hotel, went silent enough to hear cutlery settle. Amara, 6 months pregnant, steadied one hand on her belly and refused to blink. Her breath was controlled, deliberate, protective. The waiter who had doused her stood with the empty pitcher tilted, his jaw fixed in a crooked triumph he mistook for authority. A couple near the window put down their glasses. A teenager across the aisle lifted a phone, eyes wide. Somewhere behind the bar, the private elevator pinged softly as it began its slow descent from the executive floors. The waiter, Brent, had circled her table for 20 minutes, trading smirks with a busser, letting other patrons order and eat while Amara's reserved card lay untouched beside a radiant gardenia centerpiece. When she asked, warm but firm, if someone could please take her order, she was here for an anniversary dinner. He had answered with a pointed chuckle that carried. Then came the muttered remarks, low enough to deny but loud enough to humiliate, about who belongs at premium tables, about standards, about not mistaking a lobby for a food court. Each word wasn't just a barb. It was the same old gate pulled across a doorway that too many people had already fought to open. Amara had endured worse. She had taught high school literature through a contentious rezoning, had led parent conferences where respect came slowly, had walked boardrooms where her voice was measured against people who didn't understand how many lives she carried with her every day. But tonight should have been simple. A quiet table by the bay window, a celebration of love, a toast to the baby whose heart had become the metronome of their home. She had texted her husband, Darius, still upstairs in a quarterly strategy session. Here, same spot as our first date. Hurry, I'll order your favorite. Instead, she stood drenched, shivering from the shock and the air conditioning, watching as the manager, Shelley, rushed over with a napkin and a tight smile that said liability more than care. Several diners filmed. Others looked away, hoping discomfort would pass like a draft under a door. Ma'am, Shelley began, eyes skimming the room for cameras, I'm sure this is a misunderstanding. If we could just... A misunderstanding? Amara's voice was level and resonant, the kind that could carry to the far wall without rising. Your employee threw water in a pregnant guest's face while implying she didn't belong at a table she reserved. That isn't a misunderstanding. That is misconduct. Brent folded his arms. He spoke in polished disdain, the kind that tries to render cruelty respectable. He insisted he had protected standards, implied that certain appearances were suspicious, that he had sensed a situation. His language was evasive, yet unmistakable. Around them, people's faces set into the single shape that shame and shock share. Amara's phone vibrated in her hand, her earlier text from Darius unread. She tapped a single number, the one that connected to his executive assistant, and said, "Tell him I need him downstairs. Now." She hung up and turned to Shelley. "This dining room is full of witnesses," she said, "and cameras, and a private elevator that just opened." The doors parted. A tall man in a charcoal suit stepped out, chin lifted, eyes sweeping the room in one measured arc that took in the broken pitcher, the soaking dress, the manager's tight-lipped face, the waiter's stance, the phones. The staff nearest the host stand straightened instinctively. "Mr. Cole," the maitre d' blurted, startled into formality. Darius crossed to Amara without a word, cupping her cheeks, checking for a cut that wasn't there, then resting a palm on her abdomen, feeling for the gentle reassurance of movement. When he exhaled, it sounded like resolve being forged. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "The baby's okay," she whispered. "But I'm not leaving this room without being heard." He nodded once, the simplest vow. Then he looked at Brent and spoke so calmly the hush got deeper just to hear him. "I'm Darius Cole," he said. "We need to talk." The room recalibrated around the name. Staff who knew the org chart knew exactly what Darius meant. Chairman of Arbor Grand Hospitality, owner of the hotel they were standing in, steward of the brand displayed on the brass plaque outside, grandson of the woman whose portrait watched from the wall. Lydia Cole, the head housekeeper turned franchise builder whose story was company lore. Darius didn't raise his voice. He unlocked his phone and typed 3 messages: security, legal, communications. Preserve all footage, he told the maitre d'. Close new seating for 30 minutes. Offer guests refreshments and reassure them they'll be informed. We'll take questions after I speak. Shelley tried to seize control. Mr. Cole, I was just explaining. You were minimizing, Darius said evenly, while my wife stands soaked. He turned to Brent. What made you target her? I didn't target anyone, Brent said, adjusting his tie. I followed protocol. I had concerns about. About what? Darius asked, still calm. Clothing? Skin? A ring? A belly? Which concern justified humiliation? Name it, so we can be honest about the bias you dressed up as policy. The silence stretched. Darius gestured toward a framed photo near the fireplace. A 1974 black and white of Lydia Cole, standing in front of a tiny motor court with a ring of keys and the defiant smile of someone who decided dignity was destiny, not a favor. This company began because doors kept getting closed on families who looked like mine, Darius said to the entire room. My grandmother built spaces where everyone was welcomed with care. We do not pour cold water on that legacy. He faced Brent again. You're done here, he said, but not like a flourish, more like a gate closing with a latch that had been tried too many times. You are terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you off property. You will not enter another Arborgrand site. HR will follow up about severance policies you forfeited by engaging in guest harassment. A collective intake of breath moved the room like a wind. Brent's jaw tightened, then loosened as the scale of his miscalculation arrived, late and absolute. And that, Darius added, turning to the tables, is the smallest part of what must change. He shifted to the manager. Shelley, multiple staff attempted to report this pattern, he said. I know because my ethics line logs crossed my desk last month. 2 of them were closed as personality conflicts. Now we see the result. You are suspended pending investigation. Tears sprang to Shelley's eyes, sincere but late. I didn't want to accuse anyone of bias. Darius supplied gently, not unkind, but unyielding. You don't stop harm by refusing to name it. He turned to Amara, then to the diners. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for what you witnessed, he said. We will make this right with every guest in this room. But more importantly, we will make this right for the people who come after you. Phones lowered just a little. Attention shifted from spectacle to accountability. Tonight, Darius said, we're convening our executive team here. We'll listen to staff. We'll announce immediate reforms. This is not a PR sidestep. It's a reset. Stay if you wish. You will see what accountability looks like when it matters. He walked Amara to a quiet alcove. I can take you home, he murmured. She shook her head. I want to be here, she said. Not to watch him fall, to watch us build. Darius pressed his forehead to hers, then looked out over the room again. Then we build, he said, as security escorted Brent toward the service corridor and the private elevator rose to fetch everyone whose job, tonight, was to ensure that this never happened again. The Laurel's dining room transformed from a stage for humiliation into a forum for truth. Napkins were replaced with notebooks. PR arrived with a laptop, but no spin. Legal unzipped a simple folio and asked for statements without leading questions. HR pulled up the ethics portal and reopened 3 tickets that should never have been closed. The maitre d' added pots of fresh tea and trays of warm bread. Small kindnesses that kept people grounded while the big work began. Dorothy, a veteran server whose kindness had outlived 6 property renovations, stepped forward first. I've been here 15 years, she said, voice low but carrying. This place is a home to me. But lately some folks have felt comfortable saying quiet things out loud. I told management when it happened. I was told to be patient with new hires. A pause. I've been patient my whole life. Amanda, a younger server with a nervous laugh that disappeared as she spoke, recounted how she'd been asked to reassign 2 celebratory tables because someone else would be a better fit, code that everyone in the back understood. I thought I was helping avoid conflict, she admitted. But now I see I was helping hide it. A bartender described a guest who snapped fingers and demanded a different server for the vibe. A host recalled a caller who asked whether a certain crowd frequented Saturday nights. A line cook, eyes on his cap, said he heard dining room euphemisms that told whole stories in 3 harmless words. Wrong crowd tonight. Looks flashy. Keep an eye. Darius did not defend the brand. He dismantled the defense reflex itself. Thank you, he repeated after each account. We should have responded sooner. He wrote names. He asked what safety would look like on a Monday afternoon, not just in a crisis. He promised to be specific in the morning when the sun was less theatrical, but the work more so. Shelley, still present because accountability shouldn't vanish behind a closed door, spoke falteringly. I didn't want to be unfair, she said. I believe neutrality was my job. Neutrality in the face of disrespect protects disrespect, Amara said quietly. She had found a dry sweater from the hotel boutique, her hair twisted up in a silk scarf a housekeeper had offered. Fairness requires choice. We choose dignity on purpose. Legal outline steps, an independent investigation, a hotline relaunched with third-party oversight, disciplinary reviews for managers who minimized bias reports, retraining that wasn't a slide deck but a practice, role plays, scripts, interventions, consequences, and, just as crucial, repair. Repair, Darius echoed. We are responsible for safety, not only statements. We'll fund an initiative beyond these walls, something that returns care to the community we wounded by failing one person in plain sight. He looked to Amara. What do you need? Her eyes shone, part fury, part relief, part the complicated tenderness of a life growing within. I need the next pregnant woman who walks into any Arbor Grand site to be greeted like family, she said. Not with suspicion. And I want someone, preferably you, to stand up and say that out loud in every morning briefing until it becomes boring. It will become culture, Darius said, and then it will become instinct. Outside, the night deepened. Inside, the room brightened with a strange, practical hope. People stopped filming. They started helping. The pianist returned to the bench and played something warm but unshowy. Guests stayed to witness, not the spectacle but the shift. By morning, the clip had spread beyond the city's orbit and into timelines where people argued about everything except dignity. Some wanted punishment only. Others asked for transformation that went past a headline. Reporters waited under the porte-cochere for quotes. A civil rights coalition reached out privately, offering to facilitate listening circles instead of press conferences. Darius accepted. At 10 o'clock, the ballroom hosted a community gathering. Folding chairs, no dais. Along the back wall, a banner read in simple type, "We listen. We learn. We repair." Cameras were allowed, but kept to the edges. People spoke in first person, not hashtags. A retired teacher shared memories of being turned away from restaurants for the ambience, back when the city's skyline was shorter and the barrier taller. A hospitality worker from another chain admitted she had left a job because looking the other way became part of the job description. A young father said he'd watched the video with his daughter and asked what she saw. A lady who was brave, the child had said, and a man who remembered who he was. The company's chief people officer presented the first set of changes, not as a flourish, but as a checklist with dates. Same-day suspension for any staff involved in guest harassment pending review. Manager accountability attached to bias report outcomes. Mandatory bystander intervention training for all guest-facing roles, taught by experts who had coached stadium ushers, museum docents, medical receptionists. We will rehearse respect the way we rehearse fire drills, she said. Respect is safety. Communications outlined a new standard for apologies, not templates, but specific acts of repair. The Cole Family Fund for Dignity in Hospitality would underwrite scholarships for frontline workers seeking credentials, stipends for childcare during training, and grants for community partners building safe, welcoming spaces. The first disbursement would support a maternal health nonprofit Amara loved, one that offered rides, warm meals, and postpartum check-ins disguised as neighborly visits. Then Darius stood. He didn't mention market cap, number of properties, or curated brand adjectives. He mentioned his grandmother's second job cleaning offices at night, his mother's first day as a front desk clerk, his own first summer hauling laundry carts, and learning the choreography of service from housekeepers who moved like quarterbacks calling audibles in hallways. "We cannot undo last night," he said. "We can decide what we do because of last night. We built our name on the promise that anyone who crossed our threshold would be treated like they belong. We failed one person in front of 1,000 eyes. So we will overcorrect, with discipline for those who harm, with protection for those who speak, with practice for those who serve, and with resources for those beyond these walls who carry more than a tray, a shift, or a title." He paused, then looked toward Amara in the third row, where she sat with a hand on her belly and the other clasping Dorothy's. "I am not interested in managing a reputation," he said. "I'm interested in keeping a promise." The room did not applaud. It breathed. And then the work began in the unglamorous way that work always does. Sign-in sheets, scheduling, supervisors asking for coverage so their teams could train, HR setting up listening office hours in the break room instead of HR's office, because the people who most needed to talk rarely had time to leave their stations. Brent woke to an inbox that had become a verdict. Employment terminated, benefits information, a note that read, "You are barred from all Arbor Grand properties." The clip followed him, pixelated and damning, to every interview he tried to book. He told himself he had been protecting standards. He told himself he had been misunderstood. He told himself all the stories that preserve pride in the face of collapse, until the stories cracked under their own weight, and he had nothing left to narrate but the truth. He had chosen contempt and called it control. He showed up at the ballroom door on the second night of listening sessions, not to speak but to watch. He stood near a pillar, cap low. He heard a busser describe stepping in front of a colleague to intercept a comment, and how confidence felt like a muscle that grew when used. He heard a security guard talk about an elderly guest who got lost in the lobby, and how belonging sometimes means simply walking beside someone until they find the elevator again. He heard Amara's voice without seeing her face, steady, teacherly, kind but not soft, explaining why not meaning harm is not a defense. Impact is. Afterward, Brent waited near a service exit like a man who knows a hallway better than a hearth. He asked the coordinator if he could speak with Darius. Not to bargain, he said, just to apologize. The coordinator brought back not Darius, but Amara. "You hurt me," she said, her voice unbroken by drama or disdain. "And you could have hurt my child. Say what you came to say." Brent swallowed. "I thought I was protecting something," he said. "I thought making people uncomfortable was how you guard brand. But I was guarding my prejudice and calling it policy. I am sorry." Amara's eyes softened, not in a letting off the hook way, but in the exacting way care sometimes looks when it refuses to become indulgence. "Then do something with that," she said. She handed him a flyer. The fund's volunteer intake. "Repair isn't a sentence you serve. It's a practice. Show up for someone you don't know. Listen more than you speak. Learn how to intervene when a colleague starts down the road you took." Brent nodded. "I will." He meant it the way people mean a vow when they have nothing left to protect but the person they could become. Weeks later, he hauled boxes at a baby supplies drive organized by the maternal health nonprofit the fund had backed. He learned to install car seats with a patience that surprised him. He started an online bias training. Not the tick box kind, but a community course where facilitators asked questions that curved like mirrors. When a new volunteer made a thoughtless remark, Brent heard himself say, "Hey, slow down. That's not how we do this." And he felt a small, necessary shame give way to a sturdier kind of pride. He asked for a chance to apologize to the staff at the Laurel. Not for forgiveness, he said to the HR manager coordinating it, but for truth. The meeting was short. He said he had looked away from his own reflection too long. He said he understood if none of them wanted to see him again. He said he was grateful for a company that didn't spin his harm into a teachable moment for themselves, but into actual teaching for him. Dorothy nodded once, eyes bright. "Keep showing up," she said. "We'll see who you are by where you stand." A year later, the Laurel felt familiar and new at once. The menu had seasonal notes hand-lettered by an intern whose handwriting looked like grace. The host stand displayed a small placard that guests read twice. "Our standard is dignity. If you see something that doesn't look like welcome, tell us. You'll be heard, and so will we." In the staff room, Laminated cards listed intervention phrases staff could practice until they flowed. I can take this table. We don't speak to guests like that. Let's reset. I'm calling a manager. Leave the check with me, and please step aside. Role plays happened weekly, not as punishment, but as muscle memory. The company's ethics line reported more calls for a month, and then fewer. Not because people gave up, but because managers got better at catching harm before it needed a phone number. Amara and Darius returned for dinner. She wore a sunflower yellow dress. He wore a quiet smile he saved for rooms that had grown from a wound. A young server, named Nor, approached with a welcome that felt like an embrace woven into words. Nur didn't know she was serving the owners. She only knew the training that streamed through her like a second language. Greet eye to eye, listen, anticipate, never assume. She set down a celebratory sparkling cider with a flourish. On the house, she said. For your anniversary. How did you know? Darius asked, genuinely surprised. Your reservation notes, Nurse said, but also the way you both looked at the window seat. She grinned. That kind of glance has a story. They ate the dish that had been their first dates. Herb-roasted sea bass with citrus fennel and roasted fingerlings. They talked about baby names again, laughing at the same contenders that had charmed them once and fallen out of fashion now. Amara felt a wave flutter beneath her palm. Another child already telling jokes with feet. Midway through the meal, the pianist segued into an old tune Amara's mother used to hum while seasoning a Sunday roast. Amara closed her eyes. When she opened them, she saw near the bar a volunteer from the baby supplies drive, struggling with a bulky donation box. Brent, there to drop off a receipt for the nonprofit's storage rental, stepped in without fanfare, lifted the box, and asked where it should go. Nor pointed him to the service door. He moved quietly, eyes down, present but unintrusive. No one in the dining room recognized him except Dorothy, who watched him for a long moment and then returned to polishing glassware with a small smile that contained more than words could hold. Not absolution, not amnesia, just the complicated relief of work done and work ongoing. After dessert, honeyed peaches, vanilla bean, almond crumb, Darius asked if he could say something to the room. The maitre d' nodded. He stood, napkin folded on the table like a white flag of truce with a past that would never entirely leave, but would no longer run the show. Friends, he began, addressed to strangers by choice. I want to thank you for letting this place be what it says it is. Not perfect, not polished into pretending, just practicing welcome out loud, together, until it's the only thing that feels natural. He gestured toward the wall where a new photo hung. Lydia Cole again, now paired with a mirror image. Employees of every role, from housekeeper to chef, from security to concierge, arranged in a portrait that looked like a promise. We say in our morning briefings, he continued, that everyone who walks in carries a story we cannot see, and we carry the choice to add a good chapter to it. He sat. Amara reached for his hand. The pianist found a major key and held it just long enough for the dining room to breathe easier than it had when they first arrived. Outside, a family posed for photos under the brass Arbor Grand emblem. Inside, a couple on their first date smiled too much and didn't hide it. In the kitchen, a sous chef announced a new hire's first perfect sauce with the pride of a proud sister. At the host stand, Nor coached a trainee through the phrase that had become the staff's favorite, because it could be used 100 ways and never wear out. Welcome in. We're glad you're here. And somewhere between the front door and the window table, between a picture and a promise, between instant consequences and patient repair, a company kept its name by keeping its word, one greeting at a time.